one. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Do you remember a movie that turned the entire Star Wars universe into one giant joke using ludicrous speed, dark helmet, wearing his helmet backwards, and breaking the fourth wall to an insane degree? That's Spaceballs. In 1987, Mel Brooks brought us a movie that from the outside looks like a serious science fiction film. But in reality, Spaceballs is the craziest and most meta-hilarious Star Wars parody bomb in history. The main character is Lone Starr, played by Bill Pullman, along with Barf, the half-dog, played by John Candy, Dark Helmet, played by Rick Moranis, and Mel Brooks playing two roles. President Skroob and Yogurt, the master of the Schwartz. With an extremely high joke density, countless visual gags, breaking the fourth wall, and the stupidest situations, Spaceballs packs hundreds of jokes into just 96 minutes, leaving audiences breathless. The movie parodies almost everything from Star Wars, from the Millennium Falcon becoming Eagle 5, lightsabers becoming Schwartz, to the scene where Dark Helmet watches the actual Spaceballs movie on VHS. And behind that chaotic appearance is a production story even crazier than the film itself, from George Lucas allowing the parody but with a strange condition. John Hurt self-parodying his death scene from Alien, to the Ludicrous Speed scene being shot for real at dangerous speeds. Today we're counting down the 15 strangest facts about Spaceballs 1987 that you may never have known. And stay until number 1, because George Lucas allowed Mel Brooks to parody Star Wars, but with a very special condition, and the movie has some of the craziest film scenes in Hollywood history. Once you're comfortable, buckle up. Get ready to laugh your head off, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Prepare for Mel Brooks' craziest, hilarious journey. Number 15, the origin from Mel Brooks' son's idea and George Lucas allowing the parody. Spaceballs started from a simple question from Mel Brooks' son. In 1985, when Max Brooks was only 9 years old and obsessed with Star Wars, the boy asked his father, "Why don't you make a Star Wars parody movie?" Mel Brooks laughed loudly and thought it was a great idea. He began developing the project right after that. However, because this was a direct parody of Star Wars, a gigantic George Lucas brand, Mel Brooks knew he had to get permission from the owner himself. He decided to call George Lucas directly to ask for permission. Lucas surprisingly agreed to let Mel Brooks make the parody movie. But with one very special condition: Mel Brooks could satirize the movie's content, but he was absolutely not allowed to make toys, merchandise, or any commercial products that could be confused with the real Star Wars. Lucas did not want young audiences to get the two universes mixed up. Mel Brooks accepted the condition and started writing the script. At first he wanted to name the movie Star Wars, but the studio wouldn't allow it, so he finally chose the name Spaceballs. George Lucas giving permission was a major turning point, because at that time parodying a blockbuster like Star Wars was still very rare and risky. Thanks to Lucas's permission and the idea coming from his own son, Mel Brooks created one of the craziest and most meta-science fiction parody movies in history. If it weren't for that phone call and Max Brooks's innocent idea, Spaceballs would certainly never have existed. This is the most interesting origin for a movie that later became a cult classic and still makes audiences laugh hysterically after more than 35 years. Number 14, Mel Brooks played two main roles and had a severe allergic reaction to face paint when playing Yogurt. In Spaceballs, Mel Brooks not only directed and co-wrote, but also played two important roles himself: President Skroob, the stupid and cowardly president of the planet Spaceball, and Yogurt, the master of the Schwartz, a Yoda parody character with thick yellow paint on his face. Brooks playing these two roles created many classic humorous moments, especially the scene where Skroob and Yogurt meet. However, filming the Yogurt role became a nightmare for him. Mel Brooks had to sit for hours while the makeup team applied thick yellow paint over his entire face and head. He had a severe allergic reaction to the paint and special glue, causing his face to turn red, itch badly, and swell up. Many takes had to be stopped because Brooks couldn't stand the itching and had to wipe his face repeatedly. He later said there were days he almost cried from the pain and itching, but he still tried to perform because he wanted the yogurt role to be perfect. Despite the major health difficulties, Mel Brooks persisted and even added many improvised lines for yogurt. This sacrifice brought two iconic characters to the movie: a greedy, stupid president and a funny Schwartz master with the classic line, "May the Schwartz be with you." Mel Brooks, directing while playing two major roles and suffering from severe skin allergies, became one of the most interesting and admirable behind-the-scenes stories of Spaceballs. It is also proof of Mel Brooks's do-everything-for-the-movie spirit. Number 13. John Hurt's cameo parodying his own alien death scene. One of the most classic meta-gags in comedy history. In Spaceballs, there is a scene where Dark Helmet and his men are torturing Lone Starr and Barf, and they call a doctor to examine them. Suddenly a man steps forward. It is John Hurt, who had played Kane in the 1979 movie Alien. Immediately he starts clutching his stomach in pain, and then a small creature bursts out of his chest, exactly like the classic scene in Alien. But instead of causing fear, the little creature puts on a tiny hat, grabs a microphone, and starts singing "Hello, my baby" in a funny way. This is one of the funniest meta moments in the movie. John Hurt agreed to the cameo only because he wanted to self-parody his own famous death scene. Mel Brooks said he called John Hurt and asked, "Do you want to die again? But this time it will be really funny." Hurt laughed loudly and accepted immediately. Filming this scene was not easy either. The crew had to use practical effects to create the creature bursting from the chest, and Hurt had to perform the pain seriously before switching to comedy. This scene not only parodies Alien, but also self-mocks the science fiction movie industry itself. It became one of the most beloved and frequently mentioned segments when talking about Spaceballs. Thanks to this special cameo, John Hurt turned the horror of Alien into big laughter. This is the perfect proof of Mel Brooks's filmmaking style, daring to invite the victim of the classic scary scene to come and mock himself. The scene of John Hurt singing "Hello, my baby" with the little creature still makes audiences laugh hysterically every time they watch it, and it has become one of the best meta-gags of the 1980s. Number 12. Rick Moranis and the idea of Dark Helmet changing his voice when wearing the helmet. One of the most creative gags in Spaceballs. When Rick Moranis took the role of Dark Helmet, the Darth Vader parody, he came up with an extremely smart, humorous idea himself. Moranis suggested that every time Dark Helmet put on the big helmet that covered his face, his voice would completely change, from normal to a deep, majestic Darth Vader-style voice. And when he took the helmet off, his voice would return to normal, a bit high-pitched and slightly weak. Mel Brooks heard it and burst out laughing and agreed immediately. This was completely Rick Moranis' creation and was not in the original script. On set, Moranis had to constantly switch his voice quickly and precisely every time he put on or took off the helmet. Many scenes required him to perform over and over to find the funniest rhythm and timing for the voice change. Moranis also added many small details himself, such as a trembling voice when scared or a booming voice when giving orders, making the character Dark Helmet extremely funny. Thanks to this idea, Dark Helmet was not just a copy of Darth Vader, but became a parody character with his own personality that audiences have loved for decades. Rick Moranis later said he was very happy to be allowed to create freely for the role, and the idea of changing his voice when wearing the helmet was what he was most proud of in Spaceballs. The scene where Dark Helmet keeps putting on and taking off the helmet to change his voice is still one of the most quoted and re-watched segments. This is a classic example of Mel Brooks's filmmaking style, encouraging actors to come up with their own gags and letting them freely destroy the character in the craziest way. Thanks to Rick Moranis and the voice-changing idea, Dark Helmet has become one of the most classic funny villains in cinema. Number 11. Ludicrous Speed and Plied Speed, the most dangerous film scene in Spaceballs. One of the most classic and craziest scenes in the movie is when Dark Helmet orders the switch to Ludicrous Speed to chase Lone Starr. Immediately, the Eagle 5 ship blasts off at terrifying speed, everything on board shakes violently, the characters are slammed into their seats, and the outside scenery turns into a flashing plaid pattern of colors. Mel Brooks wanted this scene to be truly shocking and funny, so he decided to film it with practical effects instead of just using illustrations. The crew installed seats on a powerful hydraulic platform, then pushed the filming speed extremely fast, combined with wildly moving cameras. Actors Bill Pullman and John Candy had to endure such strong shaking that they nearly vomited and became severely dizzy. Rick Moranis, as Dark Helmet, also had to perform under intense shaking conditions. This filming was extremely dangerous because the platform could lose control at any moment. Mel Brooks later admitted he was worried throughout the shooting because he feared the actors would get hurt. To create the plaid speed effect, the crew had to use special filming techniques combined with lights and manual camera movement. The result is one of the most impressive visual gags and most frequently mentioned scenes in comedy history. Later, Elon Musk even took inspiration from this scene to name 2 acceleration modes on Tesla cars, Ludicrous Mode and Plaid Mode. The Ludicrous Speed scene is not just a joke, but has become a pop culture icon. Daring to film a dangerous and expensive scene just to create the punchline "Ludicrous Speed, go" clearly shows Mel Brooks' daring and perfectionist spirit. This is one of the reasons Spaceballs is still strongly loved after more than 35 years. Number 10. John Candy in the 30 kilograms Barf costume and remote-controlled ears, the nightmare on the Spaceballs set. To play Barf, Lone Starr's loyal and funny half-dog companion, John Candy had to wear an extremely complex, specially designed costume. The suit weighed nearly 30 kilograms, including thick fake fur, a tail, and especially the giant dog ears that could be controlled remotely. Every time filming, John Candy had to wear the heavy dog head and the full suit for many hours under hot lights. The dog ears were fitted with motors and controlled by remote, but the system often malfunctioned, causing the ears to twitch or droop at the wrong moments. Candy had to act both funny and natural while his body was weighed down and sweat poured off him. He once said that after some shooting days he could barely stand up because he was so tired and sore all over. Many scenes of Barf running, rolling, or wagging his tail had to be shot over and over because the costume was too heavy and difficult to move in. Nevertheless, John Candy kept a cheerful spirit and added many humorous actions to the character himself, such as licking Lone Starr's face or wagging his tail when happy. Mel Brooks later admitted that without John Candy's endurance and talent, the Barf role would certainly not have become so lovable and funny. The Barf costume became one of the most memorable artifacts of the movie, and John Candy had to sacrifice a lot of his health to create a cult classic character. Number 9. Pizza the Hutt and the severe burn accident of the actor, one of the classic gags that almost became a disaster. In Spaceballs, the character Pizza the Hutt is a funny parody version of Jabba the Hutt. Instead of a rubber or CGI monster, Mel Brooks decided to make Pizza the Hutt from real pizza. The crew used hundreds of real pizzas to create a giant pizza block covered in cheese, sausage, and tomato sauce. Actor Rob Paulsen, who provided the voice and body performance, had to sit inside this hot pizza costume for many hours. During one take, the hot melting cheese and sauce dripped onto the actor's skin, causing severe burns on his shoulders, chest, and arms. Paulsen nearly had to be hospitalized because the burns were quite deep and painful. The crew had to stop filming urgently, clean off the hot cheese, and change the way the costume was designed. Mel Brooks later said he was very panicked when he heard the news, because he never imagined real pizza could be so dangerous. Despite the accident, Rob Paulsen still persisted in completing the role and even added many funny lines himself. The scene where Pizza the Hutt says, "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't pizza," or the scene where he melts after being shot with Pizza the Hutt's melting, became some of the most beloved moments for audiences. Using real pizza instead of a fake model created humorous realism, but also cost the crew with burns and many extremely uncomfortable hours of cleanup. Number 8. Filming on the old set of The Wizard of Oz, an interesting and nostalgic behind-the-scenes detail of Spaceballs. Mel Brooks chose to use some historic sound stages at MGM, later Sony Pictures Studios, to film Spaceballs. And the special thing is that many scenes in the movie were shot on the same old sets that have been used to film the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz. The crew discovered that the floor of some sound stages still had leftover yellow bricks from the famous Yellow Brick Road in The Wizard of Oz. Mel Brooks loved this and considered it a fun coincidence because Spaceballs is also a colorful and fantastical movie. Many interior scenes on the Spaceball 1 ship, President Skroob's palace, and especially some desert scenes were filmed on those sound stages. The cast and crew often joked that they were following the yellow brick road to create a science fiction parody movie. Filming on the old sets not only saved costs, but also brought a special nostalgic feeling to Mel Brooks, who grew up with classic Hollywood movies. He once said that standing on those old wooden floors made him feel like he was continuing the comedy filmmaking tradition of previous generations. However, these sound stages were quite old, so the crew had to repair and renovate a lot to suit the futuristic style of Spaceballs. The combination of the historic Wizard of Oz sets and the modern Star Wars parody content created an interesting layer of meaning, from the colorful fairy tale of 1939 to the meta-comedy movie of 1987. Number 7, Joan Rivers voicing Dot Matrix at the last minute, a decision that changed the whole movie. At first, Mel Brooks had chosen another actress to voice Dot Matrix, the C-3PO parody robot. However, after hearing the test, Brooks felt it wasn't right because the actress's voice was too formal and lacked satire. Just a few days before the final recording day, he suddenly thought of Joan Rivers, the famous comedian with a high-pitched, sarcastic, and extremely quick-witted voice. Brooks called Joan Rivers urgently and invited her to take the role. Rivers accepted immediately despite her busy schedule. She flew to the studio within 48 hours and started recording. With her sharp, sarcastic, and full of personality voice, Joan Rivers turned Dot Matrix into an extremely funny robot who nags, gets jealous, and especially says sarcastic lines to Lone Starr and Barf. Many famous Dot Matrix lines like "I'm a virgin" or the nagging lines about Barf were improvised and added by Joan Rivers herself. Mel Brooks later admitted that without Joan Rivers, Dot Matrix would never have become so lovable and funny. This last-minute voice actor change became one of the luckiest decisions in Spaceballs. Joan Rivers not only saved the role but also made an important contribution to the movie's comedic success. The scenes where Dot Matrix argues with Barf or gets jealous of Princess Vespa became extremely memorable thanks to Joan Rivers' distinctive voice. This is a classic example of Mel Brooks' filmmaking style, daring to make big changes at the last minute if he knows it will make the movie better. Thanks to Joan Rivers, Dot Matrix has become an indispensable cult classic character in Spaceballs. Number 6. Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise almost played Lone Starr, two big stars who almost completely changed Spaceballs. Before Bill Pullman was chosen for the lead role of Lone Starr, Mel Brooks had targeted two names that were rising very hot at the time: Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise. Tom Hanks at that time was rising thanks to roles in Splash and Big and was seen as the perfect choice because he was both funny and had the clumsy hero quality. Mel Brooks met Hanks and sent him the script. However, Hanks ultimately declined because of a busy schedule and because he wanted to focus on other roles. Next, Mel Brooks turned to Tom Cruise, who was a young superstar after Top Gun. Cruise really liked the parody idea and read the script, but ultimately also declined because he felt the role wasn't deep enough and he wanted to avoid being typecast in comedy. Both big stars turning down the role made Mel Brooks quite worried because he needed an actor who could do deadpan humor and also carry the hero parody image. In the end, Brooks chose Bill Pullman, a less famous actor but with natural comedic quality and a goofy, cute face that was very suitable for Lone Starr. Bill Pullman later said he knew he was the third choice and tried his best to prove himself. It turned out to be the perfect choice. Pullman's clumsiness, sincerity, and comic timing helped make Lone Starr a lovable and funny character exactly as Mel Brooks wanted. If Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise had taken the role, Spaceballs could have had a completely different tone, perhaps less stupidly cute and more serious. Both big stars turning it down unintentionally helped the movie find Bill Pullman, who later came to be considered the ideal choice for Lone Starr. Number 5. The highest budget of Mel Brooks' career at that time. A number that surprised even him. Spaceballs had a production budget of up to $22.7 million. Some sources record around $25 million, which was the highest number in Mel Brooks' entire directing career up to that point. Compared to Blazing Saddles with only $2.6 million or Young Frankenstein around $2.9 million, Spaceballs was nearly 10 times more expensive. Mel Brooks later often joked that someone added an extra decimal point to the budget. The budget skyrocketed mainly due to the need for grand special effects, building many large spaceship models, hiring George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic (ILM) for effects, along with using many complex sets and new filming technology. Brooks was initially very worried because this was the first time he was making a movie with such a large budget. He once said that every time he looked at the cost sheet, he wondered, "Am I making a movie or buying an entire planet?" Even with the high budget, Mel Brooks still kept his cheap but crazy comedy filmmaking spirit. Many scenes were still shot creatively instead of pouring money into expensive effects. However, having extra money also allowed him to execute crazier ideas, such as the Ludicrous Speed scene, the giant Spaceball one-ship model, and many complex visual gags. In the end, despite their record-high budget, Spaceballs still kept Mel Brooks' signature: crude, meta, and uncompromising humor. The movie became an interesting lesson that sometimes Mel Brooks needed a large sum of money to create the stupidest jokes. Number 4. George Lucas letting ILM do the effects and allowing use of old footage, the surprising collaboration between two big names. When Mel Brooks was preparing to make Spaceballs, he called George Lucas directly to ask for permission to parody Star Wars. Lucas not only agreed, but also allowed the Industrial Light and Magic (ILM) team, the top effects company he founded, to participate in creating the special effects for the movie. This was a big privilege because ILM was the most expensive and busiest effects unit in Hollywood at the time. Moreover, George Lucas also allowed Mel Brooks to use some unused footage from the Star Wars movies themselves. Specifically, the escape pod launching from the mothership in Spaceballs was actual unused footage from Star Wars that Lucas had not used. ILM's involvement helped Spaceballs have very good effects quality for its budget, especially the spaceship scenes, Ludicrous Speed, and space effects. Mel Brooks later often joked that George Lucas not only allowed me to mock his movie, but also helped me make it look good. This collaboration became one of the most interesting behind-the-scenes details of Spaceballs. Many audiences watching the movie for the first time didn't realize that some effects and shots actually came from the father of Star Wars. This is also proof of George Lucas's open-minded humor at the time. Thanks to the support from ILM and the old footage, Spaceballs was not only a parody, but also had professional image quality, making the movie much more grand and watchable. Number 3. Dark Helmet watching Spaceballs itself on VHS, the craziest and most classic meta scene in the movie. In one of the most shocking and funniest moments in Spaceballs, Dark Helmet, Rick Moranis, sits in the command room and orders his men to find Lone Starr by watching the actual Spaceballs movie on VHS tape. He fast-forwards, rewinds, zooms in on the screen, and even argues with his own image in the movie. This scene is extremely meta, because the audience watching Spaceballs sees the characters in the movie watching Spaceballs itself. When Dark Helmet fast-forwards to the part we're watching, he even says the immortal line, "When will then be now?" And the subordinate replies, "Soon." This is one of the most quoted lines in comedy history. Mel Brooks pushed breaking the fourth wall to the maximum, turning the entire movie into a self-mocking joke. Rick Moranis had to perform alone in this scene with many complex actions, wearing the helmet to change his voice, yelling and frantically fast-forwarding the VHS tape. The scene required extremely precise timing to sync with the movie itself playing. Mel Brooks later said he was very proud of this scene because it not only parodied Star Wars, but also self-mocked Spaceballs itself. Using a real VHS tape instead of effects made the scene more realistic and funny. The scene of Dark Helmet watching his own movie on screen has become an icon of meta humor and is still considered one of the best gags of the 1980s. Many audiences had to watch the movie a second or third time to fully realize the depth and madness of the joke. Number 2. box office, and huge success on VHS, even though it didn't explode in theaters. When Spaceballs was released in 1987, the movie was not the box office blockbuster everyone expected. With a record-high budget of $22.7 million, it only earned about $38 million in North America, enough to break even but not reaching the huge success level in theaters. Many critics at the time said the movie was too crazy, too meta, and not as accessible as Star Wars. Mel Brooks was initially quite disappointed because he had expected the movie to make a big splash like Blazing Saddles. However, everything changed completely when Spaceballs hit VHS. The movie became a real phenomenon on the home video market. Audiences started buying and renting VHS tapes to watch over and over, discovering countless hidden gags, meta jokes, and small details that were easy to miss the first time in theaters. The more they watched, the funnier it became. Thanks to its strong life on VHS, Spaceballs quickly became one of the most rented movies in 1988 and 1989. Revenue from home video entertainment far exceeded theatrical earnings, turning the movie into a real commercial success. Many families and groups of young friends watched it repeatedly until they knew the lines by heart, especially the Ludicrous Speed scene, Dark Helmet watching the movie on VHS, and the line, "May the Schwartz be with you." Thanks to its VHS success, Spaceballs gradually transformed from a mild failure in theaters into a true cult classic. To this day, more than 35 years later, the movie is still strongly loved on streaming platforms and remains one of the most mentioned Star Wars parodies. Number 1. Immortal Legacy. The line, "May the Schwartz be with you," and the sequel idea that has never died. More than 37 years after its release, Spaceballs remains one of the most beloved and enduring parody movies in film history. The classic line, "May the Schwartz be with you," has become part of pop culture, quoted by millions of people, printed on t-shirts and stickers, and even used by Elon Musk as inspiration for the two acceleration modes, Ludicrous Mode and Plaid Mode, on Tesla cars. The movie turned concepts like Ludicrous Speed, Pizza the Hutt, and Dark Helmet into humorous icons that everyone knows. In 2005, Spaceballs was recognized as an important part of American culture when it was preserved in the National Film Registry. Although it wasn't a box office hit in 1987, the movie became a huge success on VHS and later on DVD and Blu-ray, becoming a true cult classic. Mel Brooks has expressed many times his desire to make a sequel. He once revealed that he already had an idea for Spaceballs 2 with the working title Spaceballs: The Search for More Money. In the sequel, Lone Starr and Barf would face a new threat, and Yogurt would return in a bigger role. Mel Brooks joked that he wanted to make part 2 just because the title sounds good. Although the sequel has not been made to this day, the idea still keeps Spaceballs fans hoping and talking about it for many years. The legacy of Spaceballs lies in the fact that it not only parodied Star Wars, but also self-mocked the Hollywood film industry itself. The movie teaches us that humor can be extremely daring, meta, and still endure over time. From a movie that was almost considered a failure in theaters, Spaceballs became a beloved cult masterpiece by many generations. And every time someone says, "May the Schwartz be with you," people immediately remember Mel Brooks and this crazy but smart comedy movie. That is the greatest legacy Spaceballs has left. And those are the 15 strangest facts about Spaceballs, 1987, the craziest, most meta, and funniest Star Wars parody that Mel Brooks ever made. From the idea coming from his son George Lucas allowing it, but with a special condition, John Hurt self-parodying his death scene in Alien, to the scene of Dark Helmet watching Spaceballs itself on VHS and the dangerous Ludicrous Speed, Spaceballs turned everything from Star Wars into merciless laughter. Even though it didn't explode in theaters, the movie became an immortal cult classic thanks to its strong life on VHS and is still strongly loved after more than 35 years. May the Schwartz be with you and Ludicrous Speed still live forever in pop culture. Which fact impressed you the most? The scene of John Hurt singing, "Hello My Baby," Rick Moranis changing his voice when wearing the helmet, or Pizza the Hutt almost burning the actor? Let me know in the comments below and share with me. If you like this series, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. May the Schwartz be with you.